Good evening. You're watching the News at 6 with me, Shan Russell. The News at 6 is all about the day's biggest developing stories, and we'll be filling in on them over the next half hour. But first, the headlines that we're tracking right now. Prime Minister Narendra Modi refers to India and Africa as two bright spots of hope in the global economy, offers $10 billion credit over the next 5 years to the African continent. The Supreme Court decides to examine Muslim personal law on divorce, calls polygamy injurious to public morals. Top Lashkar-e-Toiba commander Abu Qasim and mastermind of the Udhampur attack shot dead. Qasim carried a reward of 20 lakh rupees on his head. And scientist P.K. Bhargava announces that he will return his Padma Award, claims a climate of intolerance is affecting rational science. The top story this evening, Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the inaugural session of the India-Africa Forum Summit today. The thrust remained on the urgent need for UNHRC reforms, for which the Prime Minister sought cooperation of all 54 African nations. He also offered a $10 billion soft loan to Africa over the next 5 years in a bid to further deepen ties with the region.
India and Africa must speak in one voice for reform of the United Nations, including its Security Council.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi strongly pitching for UNHRC reforms. At the inaugural session of the India-Africa Forum Summit, the Prime Minister called on African nations to join hands with India in pressing for the long-standing demand.
The world is undergoing political, economic, technological and security transition on a scale and speed rarely seen in recent history. Yet, our global institutions reflect the circumstances of the century that we left behind, not the one we are in today. These institutions have served us well, but unless they adjust to the changing world, they risk becoming irrelevant.
Talking about the economy, Modi referred to India and Africa as two bright spots of hope and opportunities. And to strengthen their partnership, he offered a concessional credit of $10 billion to Africa over the next 5 years.
To add strength to our partnership, India will offer concessional credit of $10 billion over the next 5 years. This will be in addition to our ongoing credit program. We will also offer a grant assistance of $600 million. This will include an India-Africa Development Fund of $100 million and an India-Africa Health Fund of $10 million.
External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj also spoke of India's long-standing, multifaceted partnership with Africa.
If you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. We want to travel far on the path of development, and we want to travel together with our African friends and partners in that true spirit of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas.
This is the third India-Africa Forum Summit. The first one was held in 2008, and since then, annual trade between the two regions has more than doubled to $72 billion. With inputs from Akhilesh Suman, Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Now to our focus story for this evening, stating that polygamy is injurious to public morals, the Supreme Court is mulling banning the practice. Now, the Apex Court does do that. It'll be a huge win for women's rights. The court observed that the Muslim personal law does not safeguard women's rights against arbitrary divorce and polygamy. The court further said that just like the practice of sati, polygamy too should be banned. The court has now asked the Chief Justice to look into the issue. The two-judge bench also noted that the issue is not merely a policy matter but concerns the fundamental rights of women guaranteed under the Constitution. The issue cropped up during the hearing of a matter related to the Hindu Succession Amendment Act. Even though that matter did not directly concern the issue of gender discrimination, it was raised by some parties. The bench also noted that despite the guarantee of the Constitution, Muslim women were being subjected to discrimination. There was no safeguard for them against arbitrary divorce and second marriage by the husband. This denied dignity and security to her. And we're joined by Vikas Singh, a former Additional Solicitor General of India. Mr. Singh, to help us understand how important is this as far as equality between the genders is concerned in the eyes of law? Because as the court pointed out, that this is a matter of grave concern and really concerns half the population of the country.
Well, to be frank, this is more a social issue than a legal issue. And as the civilization evolves with time, we have to also become progressive, and we have to shun practices which were done, during medieval times, etc., which can be easily said to be not progressive. Now, this is actually an issue which the legislature in its wisdom should decide. And this is not really within the domain of the court to decide what is morally correct and what is not morally correct.
Right.
Because what may be morally correct 50 years back may not be morally correct. Like sati was permitted in India some time back, but today it is banned. So that is the evolution of civilization. As we evolve, we have to now progress towards a system where humans, whether it be male or female, are treated with dignity and have equality, complete equality before the law.
Okay.
Now, this equality, one of the facets of equality for women would be that when you permit a person to have two marriages, obviously there is a discrimination between the two wives who are married to that man, and that equality in some form or the other in the marital scheme is violated. So this is the evolution which the courts are trying to recognize.
Okay.
Although strictly it is not something which is for the courts to decide, but courts are definitely in a position to nudge the legislature to look into this aspect and legislate if necessary for the purpose of getting a uniform civil code and for ensuring
that's my point
that
exactly.
Muslim women also
Does
get
this
the
strengthen
same
the argument for a uniform civil code?
Of course, this is definitely in the direction of a uniform civil code, because if you look at the civil code, the Muslim personal laws and the Hindu laws, one of the major distinction in the marriage laws is that a Muslim man can have up to 4 wives, whereas a Hindu can have only 1 wife after the promulgation of the Hindu Marriage Act. So that huge distinction has continued for now more than 60 years, and it is high time that the country took a relook. But again, this is something which has to be, it's a very, very sensitive issue. And before bringing any law on this subject, the government also will have to hear the stakeholders, which would be the Muslim community, the Muslim women, the representatives of those community, the sociologists, the persons who can throw light on the way this practice is injurious to the equal treatment of Muslim women, and to what extent this can be sort of alleviated either by banning or by doing something else to ensure that their dignity is not compromised in any manner. So it's a very, very sensitive issue which courts can only give a direction to the legislature. Ultimately, it is a call which the legislature should take about bringing in uniform civil code, and in bringing so they can think on terms of banning polygamy.
All right, but there are some voices that are saying that it is a little bit of a judicial overreach if the court, other than law, goes into the moral domain. What would you say about that?
I totally agree with that view. I have been very firm of the view that it is not the job of the court to decide what law should be. I mean, the courts can, if at all, if there is a law which the court feel is contrary to the constitution or contrary to a fundamental right or contrary to some other settled legal principle, strike down a law. But the court can't decide what the law should be,
right.
Especially when the court is saying that this is against morality. I mean, morality is not something which is in the domain of the court at all. Morality is something which has to be gone into by social scientists and the representatives of the people to understand how society has progressed over a period of time and what changes need to be brought in to ensure that the concept of equality is more broad-based.
Right.
So this is definitely not something which the court has any jurisdiction to rule on.
All right, Mr. Vikas Singh, thank you very much for coming in. We'll have to leave it over here. But this is an issue that I'm sure will rear its head again. And let's see how this issue moves from here onwards. Thanks so much for that. Now, moving on, in a major success for the Jammu and Kashmir police, the top commander of the Lashkar-e-Toiba and the mastermind of the Udhampur attack, Abu Qasim, has been killed during an encounter in Kulgam in the valley. Acting on a tip-off, a joint team of the army and state police cordoned off an area in Kulgam town and launched an operation to nab Qasim. The terrorist was a native of Bhawalpur in Pakistan. He was accused of involvement in many big attacks on security forces in J&K over the last couple of years. He was one of the most wanted militants in the state with a reward of 20 lakh rupees on his head.
The terrorist killed has been identified. He is Abu Qasim. His real name is Abdul Rahman. He is a resident of Bahawalpur, Multan. And he was the topmost active militant of the Lashkar-e-Toiba in Kashmir. He has been active for the last 5 years in the valley. He was involved in the attack on the BSF convoy in Udhampur. He was the mastermind behind that attack.
Certainly this is an achievement for which the entire nation feels proud of. And you must appreciate that during the last 18 months, ever since the present government has been in place, you must have witnessed a decisive crusade against terrorism, which lives up to the present government's commitment for zero tolerance against terrorism.
Now, after writers, filmmakers and artists, it's now the turn of eminent scientists to protest the growing intolerance in the country, they allege. Pushpamitra Bhargav has now decided to return his Padma Bhushan. Protesting what he calls is an attack on rationalism and reason, Bhargav said that he would return the award to the government. Bhargav's decision came after 107 senior scientists signed on an online statement on Wednesday, joining the chorus of protest by other scientists, artists and writers. Bhargav also said that religious beliefs were personal choices and should not be mixed with politics, something he says is happening in the country right now. The eminent scientist will meet the Home Secretary next week to officially return his award. However, the growing protest does not seem to be affecting the government much. Hitting out at this form of protest, Finance Minister Arun Jaitley said that most of those returning the awards are anti-BJP elements. He also calls the act as manufactured rebellion.
I had already called it a manufactured rebellion. I stand by my phrase. And I think the events as they are unfolding only indicate that kind of a manufacturing is growing at a faster speed.
The government and the RSS are trying to tell us what to eat, what to say, what to dress, what to think about, and this kind of a constraint on my freedom, I don't like. I would like to do more, but I don't know what else I can do to voice my concern and mark my protest.
On to news from the Bihar elections, and midway through the polls in the state, members of both the major alliances are claiming victory for their respective alliances. Union Minister Arun Jaitley rooted for the NDA and said that they will win thanks to the Prime Minister Narendra Modi's popularity. On the other hand, the incumbent Chief Minister believes that the BJP can only win by default in Bihar and there's no neck-to-neck race. Here's a detailed report.
With the polling process in Bihar entering its final stretch, a confident Chief Minister Nitish Kumar predicted that he saw no threat to his chances of serving a third consecutive term in office. The incumbent Bihar Chief Minister warned that if the BJP wins the assembly elections in Bihar by default, it would push the nation into a deep pit.
17 महीना का समय कम नहीं होता है। 17 महीने के समय में कोई सिग्निफिकेंट काम नहीं किया, न अपने वायदों को पूरा किया, न ही गवर्नेंस के फ्रंट पर कोई उन्होंने ऐसी कोई उदाहरण पेश किया। उनका पूरा का पूरा ध्यान केंद्रित है एक राज्य के बाद दूसरे राज्य पर हम कब्जा कैसे करें।
Nitish also emphatically rejected suggestions that his Grand Alliance and the BJP-led NDA are running neck-to-neck in the 5-phase Bihar Assembly elections.
बिहार में कुछ भी नेक टू नेक नहीं होता है। यहाँ डे 1 से ऐसी बात नहीं थी। बीजेपी के लोगों ने हवा बनाने की कोशिश की थी और वो हवा बांधने में बहुत उस्ताद है, तो उसके चलते अपने पब्लिसिटी टेक्निक के जरिए वो एक माहौल बनाते हैं।
Meanwhile, the BJP exuded confidence of its own. Union Minister Arun Jaitley said that the BJP-led NDA will form the next government with 2/3 majority in Bihar due to the popularity of Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
प्रधानमंत्री श्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी की लोकप्रियता, जिस तरह से उनके कार्यक्रमों में लोगों का उत्साह है और उनके प्रति आज भी इतना बड़ा विश्वास है, वो इस चुनाव को बहुत बड़ी तरीके से प्रभावित कर रहा है।
Jaitley asserted that besides Modi's popularity, another factor contributing to the victory of the NDA is that people want to vote for the party which is in power at the center.
बिहार की जनता की अब इच्छा है कि केंद्र और राज्य मिलकर चलें और दोनों के साधनों के माध्यम से जो अवसर अभी तक बिहार को नहीं मिले वो अवसर मिलने आरंभ हो।
After the third phase of polls ended on Wednesday in Bihar, voting in 112 more seats remain out of the total 243 seats in the next two phases of polling on November 1st and 5th respectively. Counting of votes will take place on November 8th. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
Let's get you now some more news and updates from around the country and nationwide. The Indian Navy challenged the High Court order on permanent commission to women on the Women Short Service Commission officers. The High Court ordered this on a retrospective basis. The Army and the Air Force have already decided to grant permanent commission to Women Short Service Commission officers. The government today appointed a 5-member panel to review UGC research grants as it is told it to continue existing grants. Students who are on protest for the last 8 days termed the government's notification an eyewash. They said they will continue their agitation till a review is done. The telecom regulator TRAI called for a meeting with mobile carriers to discuss grievances against a directive asking telcos to compensate users for call drops. The ruling can severely hurt carriers financially. The so motor meeting is set to be preceded by a joint letter by the telecom companies, highlighting the issues that require clarification. Dismissing reports that he surrendered to the police, underworld don Jhota Rajan said he wants to go back to India, where he is one of the most wanted criminals. He also denied that he was scared of Dawood. Meanwhile, the Indian authorities are preparing documents to deport the underworld don. Time for us to take a very quick break. Lots more on the other side. Do stay tuned.
The poll juggernaut rolls out in Bihar. Modi's NDA takes on Nitish's Grand Alliance. Who will win this most important election battle since 2014? Watch Verdict 2015, Monday through Saturday on Rajya Sabha television.
Welcome back. You're watching the news at 6. Now, Pakistan has lost its bid to be re-elected to the United Nations Human Rights Council when its current term ends this year. With just 105 out of the 193 General Assembly votes in its favour, this is a huge blow to Pakistan's aspirations. Pakistan was considering running for the Council's presidency next year and was in the process of putting out feelers. The defeat is a diplomatic setback for Islamabad as it seeks to burnish its international reputation. Islamabad contested for one of the 5 slots this year for the Asia-Pacific region, for which there were 7 contestants. The UAE, Kyrgyzstan, South Korea and the Philippines have been elected from the region to serve 3-year terms. Laos was the other country to lose the election. The UNHRC is considered the second most important body in the UN after the Security Council. It has 47 members elected by the General Assembly who are responsible for promoting and protecting human rights around the world and dealing with violations. India is a member and was re-elected last year for another term. Now on to news from the US elections, and the Republican presidential debate in Colorado featured several angry exchanges, with frontrunner Donald Trump and Ben Carson coming under heavy scrutiny. Both were attacked for political inexperience. The race is slowly turning to a two-person contest between Trump and Carson.
A heated debate among the contenders for the Republican presidential nomination. Donald Trump and Ben Carson, the two clear frontrunners, were under pressure to prove their economic expertise. Candidates clashed over tax plans, with Carson fiercely defending his tax proposals, while former business executive Carly Fiorina vowed to simplify the complicated tax code.
We have 645 federal agencies and sub-agencies. Anybody who tells me that we need every penny in every one of those is in a fantasy world.
Because only if it's about 3 pages are you leveling the playing field between the big, the powerful, the wealthy, and the well-connected who can hire the armies of lawyers and accountants and, yes, lobbyists to help them navigate their way through 73,000 pages. 3 pages is about the maximum that a single business owner or a farmer or just a couple can understand without hiring somebody.
Ohio Governor John Kasich took up Carson and Trump for their inexperience.
Talk about we're just going to have a 10% tithe and that's how we're going to fund the government, and we're going to just fix everything with waste, fraud, and abuse, or that we're just going to be great, or we're going to ship 10 million Americans or 10 million people out of this country, leaving their children here in this country and dividing families. Folks, we got to wake up. We cannot elect somebody that doesn't know how to do the job. You got to pick somebody who has experience, somebody that has the know-how, the discipline.
He got lucky with fracking, believe me. That's why Ohio is doing well. And that's important for you to know. Number 2, this is the man that was a managing general partner at Lehman Brothers when it went down the tubes and almost took every one of us with us, including Ben and myself, because I was there and I watched what happened, and Lehman Brothers started it all. He was on the board and he was a managing general partner.
Lagging contenders like Jeb Bush and U.S. Senator Marco Rubio of Florida are running out of time. Carson has moved ahead of Trump in some national and local polls. The first nominating contest comes up in 3 months. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
The diplomatic efforts are being intensified to find a political solution to the Syrian conflict, with Iran taking part in the talks for the first time. Besides Iran, the other major player is Saudi Arabia and is likely to test the Russian and Iranian willingness for peace. Around a dozen participants are expected at the talks, slated to start in Vienna on Friday. It's not clear whether any invitation has been issued to either the Syrian government or the opposition. Iran accepted the invitation for talks without preconditions, but Iran, along with Russia, strongly supports Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's inclusion in any resolution process.
Saudi Arabia and Iran.
Time now for all the other international news and global buzz. A horrific video has emerged of a landslide caused by the massive earthquake that hit Pakistan and Afghanistan. The amateur video taken in the Hunza Valley in Pakistan's northern region shows rubble sliding down the mountainside after a 7.5 magnitude earthquake struck on Monday. Thailand's Supreme Court has scheduled the first hearing against former Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra for January 15th next year. Shinawatra was charged with the dereliction of duty and abuse of power and failing to stop draft and losses in rice pledging scheme implemented by her government. The first phase of Egypt's long-awaited parliamentary elections was wrapped up as the second round of voting closed with a low turnout. Official data shows the first round turnout was around 26%. The turnout rate for the second round is widely estimated to be even lower than the first round. Time now for all the sports action in Sports Beat. Indian tennis star Leander Pace and Polish Lukas Kubor entered the men's doubles quarterfinals of the Valencia Open in straight sets. The second-seeded pair beat Spaniard-Argentine wildcard pair of Pablo Carreño and Basta Federico Del Bonis 6-3, 7-5. They will next take on Chris Rucconi and Andre Sa for a place in the semis. Defending champion Viswanathan Anand drew with Chinese Liren Ding in the second round of the Bilbao Masters final in Bilbao, Spain. With this draw, Anand remains on a joint second spot. The draw against Ding came after Anand did not convert a seemingly superior position against the Dutch Grandmaster Anish Giri in the opening round. In the third round, Anand will get his first black game in the tournament against American Wesley. World number 8 Rafael Nadal advanced to the quarterfinals of the Basel International after a 6-4, 4-6, 6-3 victory over Grigor Dimitrov. However, a second-seed Stan Wawrinka crashed out of the tournament after losing to Croatian Ivo Karlovic 3-6, 7-6, 6-4. Well, that's all from us. Goodbye.